All right.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, whoa, wow. Sorry.
Oh,
There we go. You're fine.
so how much Harry Potter did you watch?
Huh. Made it through to
Okay, that's a reasonable.
a reasonable day. Thought about three, didn't pull the trigger.
Yeah, I remember once there was like a Star Wars marathon running on Christmas Day once or something, and I ended up watching like more hours of Star Wars in a day than I should mention on a recorded.
Yeah, right.
We'll just leave it like that.
Yeah. I feel like I've got a Lord of the Rings rewatch in me coming. It's been many years.
Yeah.
Hey, Don.
Hi, Don. You sort of look like a backlit astronomy image or something.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, I see you in there. Hello.
But I did want to mention, Don. I thought your talk was great. Uh, did we just lose her?
Perhaps.
Thank you. Sorry, I just misjudged the time and I'm still walking into the library. It's quite rainy here. It was one of those things where as soon as I did it, I was like, oh, here's all the things I should have done differently. But I'm glad it's done.
Yeah, that's always the case for those things, though, right? So
Yeah. I love the guy at the beginning pronouncing edgy. Oh.
It was great. He had like asked me in advance how to say it. So I thought that would not have happened, but oh well.
I mean, I have to think about it every time. Environmental data governance.
yeah, I think Dan corrected me once or filled in the blanks when I was paused trying to. So yeah, and I thought the questions were good too. I mean, there are questions I think everyone has about you start thinking about it, like provenance and tracking and things like that. So it sounds like a good audience because they're asking insightful questions. And definitely thanks for the shout out for DevOps.
Oh yeah.
I was like, yes, yeah, Don, always be closing or recruiting or whatever.
Yeah.
Actually, so but I had told you my.
We're not getting you right now.
Oh. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I said my friend Armin actually reached out afterwards, and he's based in Toronto. And he's
Sweet.
He's a reliable guy. So he was in Germany as well. Because his family is from here, so he said he would reconnect once he's back.
Cool.
Oh.
But I think we might actually have a DevOps person now.
Good. I look at the process that I'm undergoing right now is sort of encoding everything that we'd have to explain to a DevOps person anyway in order to onboard them. So there's a plausible path to a handoff here. Whereas I can't imagine just setting someone loose in the code base and being like, good luck.
Oh yeah, totally. That would be okay, I'm just going to do a switch to my computer.
But definitely, Dan, I think that you went digging in on your own is good too, just so that we have some information in multiple brains too.
Sure. And I mean, I don't want to undersell it. Like, it's definitely something that will work and be useful and a real, a real useful achievement, I guess, but also something that someone could possibly build on. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
Rob.
Travel wake. John, you're pulling the trick that I always used to pull on like every edgy call at the beginning of the year, going from the phone to the laptop.
I learned from the best. Yeah, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but I also don't think it'll take that long. So maybe wait to see if Rob is slowly zoning in. But at Congress, I connected with a few people who are doing related projects. So I kind of wanted to like sow some seeds and then figure out from all you what you thought the best way for me to most productively like connect you and not like burden you with connections would be, basically. Should I wait to see if Rob joins?
Rob is on.
Oh, okay, it's working. Sorry. Cool. Yeah, okay. So the first one was actually, and this one kind of continues with your existing, I think, relationship with Internet Archive, but I met their open science engineer, Brian, who I think has been looped into a few of your GitHub threads before, but he just like never responded because I guess he just started maybe 2 months ago. And he originally was supposed to come on to really just focus on the API, which feels like a really strong connection with like interfacing with you all. And I think having that role of interfacing in projects, but it sounds like he got pulled into something else where they're thinking about how they can extract publication data from their crawls, which is also a very interesting project, but he really wanted to be connected. And so all I said was, oh, have you spoken to or heard of like Rob and or Dan or been on Slack? So he hasn't been on our Slack, but he like knows vaguely about the project. So I guess I wasn't sure in that case, because it's with an existing collaboration, can I just write a connector email? Do you want me to, like, what would be a good way to loop him in? Are you inviting Internet Archive people to the channel on Slack? Like, is there a better way that you're kind of managing that relationship? I don't want to just like throw another one on to the pile.
I think you should just have him join Slack. Who is this?
It's his name's Brian. He's like one of the new full-time engineers at Internet Archive, who I think originally was supposed to be your point of contact, but then got pulled into other things. So Mark Graham is your current one, right?
Right. I think Mark did tag him in an issue somewhere, or maybe it was just mentioned him in Archiver, but I think you're right about that, Tom.
Okay, so I can just send him a connector email and like details to join the Slack. Is Ray, are you kind of like the best point person for pulling people into the project right now?
Yeah, I can be the first point of contact. I just was sort of onboarding this other new Dan Pfeiffer. But I mean, because Rob has the existing relationship with Internet Archive, definitely CC with him as well, I think. Does that make sense, Rob?
Sure. Apologies, there's an echo. I've had audio on my computer, but Zoom is doing its level best to otherwise crash a machine. I can't do anything to it. So it just is repeating everything.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So that one's like probably the most straightforward. Then the second one is like weird and interesting, and I think kind of also potentially crosses over with Data Together. But someone who also someone who was also a Google Summer of Code mentor. So I actually met him there, but was again at Congress. His name's Gerben, and he basically just got funding to do what your Differ work is doing, but like produce it as a library. And it's like, I think a fairly large grant from some EU organization. So he has like a year worth of paid labor to put towards this project, but he really cares about open source and doesn't want to duplicate work. So I feel like maybe there's a way to like sync up needs for some of elements of what you're using. And then like maybe knowing that he would be actually devoting like full-time development to it, that could help you understand where you would do work or something and like work together on that.
Yeah, I think based on the time that we spent looking at what's out there, I think our value add is real humans actually trying to use these red, green highlighted views and having a sense of like what the trade-offs and the compromises that you have to make are. So we might be able to sort of, whether or not he wants to use our code, he should at least be talking to us and using our analysts to decide whether he's building something useful.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think he has another use case. So it would be a cool dovetailing, I think, of like both have a site where you're getting feedback to help like refine what
Right.
you're doing, and then seeing
Awesome.
if this is at the point where you could be helpful to each other in how you develop stuff. And if not, then not. But that one seems like maybe it'd be worth having like a trying to get. I think he'll be happy to join the Slack if he actually might already be on it. But that might seem like a standalone conversation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Just about diffing, kind of doing a bit of a rundown.
Yeah, because there's also, I mean, of the 3 algorithms we were sort of originally working on, right, we just sort of decided to go for one because it was the most promising. So, you know, we could try to improve that, but there's also opportunities for these other methods too, so that maybe we sort of spread the resources and attention or something. So yeah, a different conversation would be great.
Okay, so then again, I'll do like Ray as an email intro and then instructions to join the Slack and suggest a conversation. I mean, I think the interesting pull into Data Together is that he's done a lot of stuff with like decentralized web technology. So he's written stuff that like relies upon IPFS and is pretty interested in working with the DApp project people. So that's like another nice like, already in the same space, like thinking about some similar questions for Data Together. So I thought that'd be cool to also get him, maybe if possible, working with you all, as long as it's not like burdensome work. Okay, so those are, oh, sorry, Rob.
I just wanted to say, and also like if he wants to talk technical things about the diffs, I can probably talk his ear off for several hours without stopping. So
I'm sure he would love that, based on how excited he was when I was saying, oh, you should look at what they're doing right here. I think the timeline for both of these on my end is like I think within the next week, because one of them is moving right now. Kerbin is moving from what I understand. So I don't know if they're going to get busy, but they both sounded like they wanted to think about it sooner than later. And then the last one, but this is sort of, I think, a bit of a bigger conversation, which will not have to be resolved today, is someone from FOSS Asia was asking if we wanted to propose almost like a joint project for Google Summer of Code. So they've been doing Google Summer of Code for like 10 years. They like totally have the like infrastructure support for it. And they have a similar project that I really only spoke super briefly to this guy, Michael, about, who's kind of been the leader of it, which is similar to just the front end, not sort of like the whole system, I think, that you all are working on. But and so I had sort of, I think, tried to ask a little bit about people's feelings about GSOC, and I sort of feel like also the lack of a strong response is a good sign, like in terms of where we're all at. But I kind of wanted to broach it one more time and just see if I could pursue it. I think we have time, but I would have to sort of reach out to them again quite quick. If you think some of the reasons that maybe make GSOC not feel like the best decision right now would be ameliorated if it was like working under the umbrella of an organization that has done it for a long time. Because if that is the case, it might be worth pursuing. Because I mean, I think, and this is my read, I might be wrong, that perhaps some of the pause is tied to like our capacity and like where we put our limited time, which I think is a totally legitimate like thought. This won't ameliorate needing like mentors in the summer who are like really close to the project, but I think some of the administrative time would be lightened. But again, this is also not an organization that we have like a long pre-existing relationship with, so there would be some like getting up to speed commitment I would anticipate as well. So I kind of wanted to just put that to you all and see what your initial thought was.
I think we did this last time sort of by committee, and it wasn't organized enough, and there should be a definite point person. And if I were not expecting to be a dad in March, I would consider being that point person, but I should definitely not be that point person. So I would recommend that this group identify a point person if we were going to say yes to that.
Mhm.
Likewise, we have some like Dan Pfeiffer, who I think said maybe we could just call him Pfeiffer, has experience, I think, mentoring and teaching, and would be open to that. But he's a little too early, I think, to even ask him to commit to something like that. Also, in the conversations we've had with the Packard grant with Tolly and others, I'm really going to try to. One of my main objectives is to push for having paid developer on the project. And again, with the intention too that part of the responsibility would be not just code and maintenance of systems, but also mentoring and onboarding, contributors, especially more junior contributors. But again, like I'm hesitant to sort of count on like Pfeiffer or this person. Maybe those two people are the same, but it's far too early to tell because we just need to sort of, see where Dan is and what his interests are. And then also, if we can secure the funding and how quickly can we actually get someone on board. And so there's a lot of uncertainties with that. Based on your timeline, it's tricky. I'm hesitant to try to commit.
Yeah, no. And so it's not exactly my timeline, but that's the caveat or whatever is that they moved up the deadlines for GSOC this year, actually in response to organization feedback. I don't think we were the organization saying, give us less time to get our act together based on how it went last year. But a majority of organizations wanted it moved up, so it was. So the turnaround
I'm really
is
sympathetic to your
tight this year.
To keep the momentum. You had said in Slack, like, I would hate to
Yeah.
stop the year. Is there someone in the organization who wants to take on the weekly reliability of this?
Well, I mean, so what we did last year was you wouldn't even choose the number of people right now. You just have to apply and speculate on projects. But I wouldn't even want to speculate on projects unless there were people within, like, I wouldn't want to speculate on web monitoring being a site for a project unless there was like enough interest from you all in web monitoring. And then what we had done was like apply, and then in that intervening time, that's when we did all the recruitment and gauging of like how many numbers, like how many students we might be able to accept, developing the mentor teams, etc.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that we need to know everyone who could commit to being a mentor, but we would absolutely need at least one key person in each area we would imagine a project.
And is that key person for administration? Sorry to interrupt. Is that key person someone for administration? Just like or is it more just like actual would be interacting with the potential students?
Right. They don't. Okay, so what GSOC requires is 2 org admins. You could probably just have 1 admin. I meant that more as like someone who would be committed to being on like the mentoring team. Like every student had a team of mentors. But I mean, like, I'm not like, I think our experience last year was that it took a lot of effort and, in ways that we couldn't have accounted for because it was our first year, but also probably in ways where maybe we should have accounted for, but didn't plan appropriately. So I'd like not to say like, we're totally blameless. Yeah. So I meant more like as someone who would be imagining being able to mentor committing now. And I think what I would open it to otherwise is kind of revisit with the data together people if it feels like there's a project there. Because, as an organization, you can just say that there are only a certain range of projects available. So I do think maybe momentum would be good, but I don't think it's worth forcing to the detriment of like the actual project. So I can follow up just with the data together people, but maybe also if you all have like a sense, like a strong, actually, yeah. After your meeting today, you could just like drop something in Slack, but otherwise I'll assume if no one's immediately stepping up that isn't a good fit for this coming year, which is like totally fine.
I think my postmortem is partly, bad luck with me getting taken out for a while and bad planning in general. Us collectively, everyone who sort of signed up for that, maybe not being as structured from the beginning as we should have been. And also that the project wasn't ready. I think maybe the project will be ready to carve out a small isolated thing that someone can work on. But I'm not confident in that assessment. And it doesn't seem like anyone is confidently stepping forward as a mentor. So maybe Edgy goes with Data Together. And if the project grows and Dan Pfeiffer gets more involved in time to reconsider, we reconsider.
Okay, yeah, that
I don't know.
Yeah. No, that totally works. So in no way would my takeaway from this is, there's we're probably not going to do Google Summer Code unless there's a really strong interest from people involved with Data Together, which I think is fine. Just to say that's what I'm hearing. But I'll just sort of keep dropping updates on Slack and then try and check in with the Data Together people at our next call about that.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, no worries. And so the other 2 emails I will send, and I'm really, I really am excited because I feel like it's like a good sign that people are like, oh, I know about your project. I was like, what? You know about this? This is great. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to do. I won't make us stay on a call until
we're going to be back on in 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, is there anything you need me to talk about? Or do you need to talk to me about? I feel like I haven't seen you all in over a month. Probably more.
Yeah. What else did you learn at the conference that was fun?
I want to start my own ground station and join it to the SatNogs network. That was my main takeaway. I've already emailed people at U of T, scientific coders, being like, can we do this? Where do we get roof access on campus? I will chip in money.
Interesting.
Go ahead.
It's like the Libra Space Foundation people in Greece. They have this thing called SatNogs, which is it's like a self-run ground network for really receiving and decoding satellite transmissions. Pretty cool.
So is it basically like a distributed small-scale deep space network?
I guess it doesn't. I mean, they were showing the actual ability for them to decode payloads of image data. It was pretty intense, pretty quick for how young the project is, and they launched their own satellite I think last year. So I mean, I think it's gonna go places. Yeah,
that's fun.
But I also noticed, Dawn, this pattern emerging that you come back from these conferences and you're like, okay, now I want to build this mesh network. That's what I'm gonna do.
It's good to have dreams.
Yeah.
I mean, I stay focused a little bit in execution, just not in ideas.
Baltimore had a mesh network that got taken down. I was reading about. Did you know about that one?
No. What was it called?
Cool.
It came out of Hopkins. I'm not going to think the name, but I'll paste it in random or something. The source is still open, and the academic group tried to close it gracefully, but they said, we published our paper, we got our citations, we're moving on. We never really cared about you, and so I guess we'd have to. But it's sort of open for someone else to take up the mantle, which is.
Yeah, on the mesh networking thing, just to say, I have been involved in a group for over 2 years, so that's not new. But just after the FCC ruling, there's been such a huge upswing and people contacting it. The NYC Mesh end of year report, they said they had over 400 requests for a new node, which is huge. And they showed their previous monthly requests were averaging in the 20 to 60 range. Wow. So yeah, I think there have been previous waves of community network stuff, and in the last wave it was kind of more community Wi-Fi projects instead of broadband access stuff. I think there's maybe kind of going to be another wave just in terms of the uptick of people talking about it and kind of critical mass and attention and interest. But then it also feels weirdly retro because I know people who are 10 years older than me who are building mesh networks 10 years ago. So,
There are no new ideals. They just come back in vogue.
And like, it's not necessarily like the tech is any better. I can drop, there's some really good talks I can drop if you want in the general channel. Some interesting stuff. I don't know, a lot of like internet freedom stuff about like censorship, which is mostly disheartening at this point. But the Catalan referendum one was actually like a real world deployment of using IPFS to circumvent censorship. So I thought that was interesting.
Oh, cool. Nice. The other thing, Dawn, is so it's sort of, we should touch base too just about community outreach in general. I'm having these monthly meetings just to sort of check in on the PMing of the project. It's part of the agreement contract with EDGI and Public Labs. So you and PetCon weren't able to make it, but I'm hoping to schedule one next week or in the next couple of weeks. It'd be great if you could attend that, and then we can also just start talking about outreach. I think we're getting to the point where I'm constantly trying to outreach, but selectively, just not to do these like wide casting in nets, just because I want to be able to support the people that would be interested in helping. So that's on the radar screen too, in terms of just wanted to put that in your ear.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I actually had reached out to PatCon to kind of feel out like where he was at and where we're at in terms of our availability over the next 4 months, because like I get mine decreases until June. Basically every month it gets less, and then after June it kind of bounces back. It's like fingers crossed, calls go well. I had asked, or I sort of said something about the tools. Like I think kind of urgently, we should do a bit of almost like a postmortem debrief on what tools are working, what aren't, because I think we probably have some like shared consensus of like, hey, we could go in this direction, and there's some pain points that we've all identified. And I think some things are sitting at like an 80%, and we should just put in the effort to getting them to 100% working, or like know that we've moved on from them, because that might be unclear. So I was trying to confirm with PatCon, because I feel like that'd be really great to have his insight in a time to try and do that. But that would, I think, be prior, Ray, to the call you're talking about, unless I'm misunderstanding when your monthly things are.
It would probably be prior. This is, I think, like the tools conversation, I think is a lot more potentially substantive in terms of the work it would produce.
Right.
So I think we can try to schedule them in parallel. I don't think they need to happen one before the other. It's whatever happens first, just happens first.
Great. Okay. I mean, like we're in general trying to use that community building channel to talk about community things. So maybe that's a kickoff for trying to schedule stuff. I should probably jet because I have to go to a different VoIP service to get on this other call, and I want to make sure it works because it's Skype. I haven't used Skype in a while. Ooh.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm glad I could connect with you all, and I hope your meeting goes well.
Thanks.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Let's see. I know Tolly had a conflict at 1:30, but he wasn't clear to me if he was going to be able to join at 2, but I think he might.
What is happening at that SC meeting? Do you have any more sight into that than I do, Ray?
I don't know. I can tell you everything I know. So it's from 12 to 2. I'll be joining it. The first part is, I think, this is sort of by request at the last SC meeting. Tolly and Andrew are presenting like half an hour, like their work up to date and what they've been doing, because I think there just wasn't clarity on that. And then there's after that, there's like a half-hour closed steering meeting discussion of what was discussed. Mm-hmm. And then I think at 1 to 2, it sort of reopens, and the discussion will go back to just general, I think, SC business, but including, I think one of the big things on the agenda is the Packard proposal.
Hey, Toy.
So,
I saw Lindsay explaining the order of it, saying it was critical to do it in that order, which makes me wonder, is the subject of the private discussion related to the Packard grant? What is happening?
that I'm not sure about, like, why the ordering was so specific. Yeah, I mean, maybe because I think there are some issues on the Packard grant, because part of it is, and it wasn't clear, and we're still waiting for clarity back from the organization, but they are interested in other domains, not our Packard, not our, like, but the way these things work up, because these foundations are huge, is that, like, there are these different arms, these different divisions and of interest, and so. It's
Right.
Like, we have this contact person who's involved in the environmental initiatives, but the people in other areas and disciplines, I think, could totally be like that version of our contact. So
Right.
we don't even. So I think there's questions on, like, how do we present ourselves to as an organization to Packard and things like that. That I think they wanted a little more clarity on before they start talking about the grant. Maybe that's why the order was important.
Makes sense.
Hey, Toli, do you have audio?
Hey, how's it going? I should. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
I was about to raise my thumb, but you can't.
Cool.
Yeah, and we just had a good debrief with Dawn on some contacts she made in, I guess she's in Germany now, and then also just some summer of code issues that we can bring up to speed on. Just, what our level of commitment and interest is for summer of code this summer, and the gist of it is we weren't, as a, no one sort of stepped forward, and we're just a little cautious about the capacity to support Google Summer of Code again this summer. That might change with some of the new people we're onboarding, as well as, the Packard grant. But at this point, no one wanted to really commit to anything. And she said she might try to continue the interest in GSOC with Data Together. And if that goes forward, maybe we can piggyback on that if we feel ready, like a little down the road.
Right.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the update.
I'll add that if anyone on your side, totally, like, I know Eric, and I'm forgetting the name, but I think it's a woman who's sort of interested in, like, the sort of coding and notebooks to do analysis, is enthusiastically interested in that, and we can pose this in such a way that it's not going to accidentally fall back on Rob like it did last summer, which is my main concern. Then maybe it's worth asking.
Yeah, so Eric and Catherine are both been kind of interested in doing some of the language analysis, and Eric's already used some of your scripts that you wrote to pull some information out.
Yeah.
I know that's been he's been interested, but I think hasn't had too much time to kind of commit to it. So what would be the way to engage them? Because I would love for them to have kind of a better source of kind of knowledge. Rather, I'm basically not being very helpful in this sense, because I just trying to connect them with the right people and advise in terms of, like, the analysis.
Right. Sure. Well, so two separate things. Like, I'm definitely interested in working more with them. The parts of this project I want to work on are the analysis parts once the plumbing is in place. Maybe everybody feels that way. It's kind of sort of the interesting stuff. And we should reach out to them, but not until, we're further along in our milestones. Should that get very much of our time, I think. As a separate question, if either of them is interested in taking a lead role in mentoring a GSOC student as a sort of impetus to get involved in this kind of work, then they should talk to us and talk to Dawn about that, but only if they're interested in taking a leadership role in mentoring a student.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to suggest that. I don't, maybe kind of the new semester might be a good time to say, like, let's check in about this work and see where we stand and refocus some efforts.
Yep.
I think people are so excited, and so maybe we can have as part of have a meeting basically to discuss some of these things and bring up both of those points, especially if you're interested in contributing, then that'll be really awesome.
Sure. Yeah. To be clear, I do not want to commit to taking a leadership role in the
Sure.
GSOC stuff, and I want to make sure we don't do it unless someone really will. But I'm happy to sort of share lessons learned if someone thinks they might be interested and give a sense for how that works.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just suggesting a meeting to talk about like where we stand with this analysis work, and then saying like, oh,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
just going to continue doing what we've been doing, or
Yeah. Great. I hear you. That
Cool.
sounds good.
Cool. I don't know where Dan Dawson is, or if Pfeiffer was able to join. Because I know Dan Pfeiffer was sort of a maybe because he lives in Troy, but he's in New York City right now, and so he said he would have to find a place to get a stable connection.
Troy, New York?
Yeah.
Do they have internet in Troy?
Well, I don't know because yes, because I talked to him yesterday in Troy, but today he's in New York
Hey.
City, and so they also have.
I went there for a marching band competition once, but not a lot going on in there. Oh, hey. Speak of the devil.
Yeah, Dan, welcome.
hey, Dan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
I'd just like to note that there are a lot of Dans on the Slack nowadays.
That's a good thing.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure how we're going to address this issue.
Can't get too many of them these days.
Right.
There was a big bumper crop of Dans in the 80s.
Yeah.
Right, but the fact that these calls might have 2/3 Dan representation is impressive.
Yeah. Well, feel free to call me Dodson if it makes things any easier.
Yeah.
Do you go by that ever, or?
Yeah, sometimes. Depends on the context, but yeah, makes life easier here.
Yeah. People do Dowen with me sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Just
Great. Well, welcome, Dan.
Thanks.
Really excited that you can join us. Why don't I quickly share my screen, and then we can just run through our agenda and talk about the things we need to talk about. So we might be introduced to another Dan if he can join us, but he was maybe today, but he said he could probably join us next week. This is Dan Pfeiffer, who's another developer. He used to work at Mapzen, which sort of has gone through a lot of changes recently. I think they finally announced that they were sunsetting a lot of their services, which is too bad. That's my main update too. Just quickly, Toli, did you want to add anything from the analyst side? I have one thing down. I don't know if you can see the screen, Toli, but we're starting to onboard the analysts in production this week, which is going well. I think I've identified everyone who hasn't, who's sort of actively on the sheets, but isn't in production. So I've reached out to them.
Yeah, it looks good. I guess maybe I'm not seeing it. I'm not sure if there's worth another quick discussion about the sheets, but maybe we can do that over Slack because it sounds like people already talked about it.
Yeah, we can talk about it. I think it's related to some of the dev update work, and so we can sort of, I think, just make sure we're all up to speed on where we are, because that is important.
Sounds good. We can talk about it then.
Cool. Why don't I quickly pull up Waffle and Dotson? I can send you any of these links if and walk you through them too at some point, because I know sort of a lot. But in terms of the Waffle board, I think we made like really great progress in the last couple weeks. A lot of the the O1 milestone work is complete and pushed, which is really fantastic. I think there's one more still in progress, which we've been talking about, the thing that Toli just mentioned about the links to the UI. So we can talk a little about that more. And then also we should start prioritizing the 0.2 work just so that people know what to work on next. Did people want to also maybe just give quick updates on what they're working on in terms of Dan and Rob?
Sure. I guess I'll start. Let's see. So we have, I'll give a little extra context for Dan, because I'm not sure how much you've looked at this, but we have basically 4 separate repos, right? I guess you got that far. The UI, the React, the Rails, the Python diffing stuff, and then this Versionista scraper, which won't survive all of the upcoming milestones, but is essential right now. And we're deploying all of them like across AWS and also Heroku and in different zones. So one goal is to move everything into this AWS, for which we have a grant, and we look to start using that grant. And then another goal is to just in general make it easier to deploy these things in coordination. To say we want to deploy a test deployment of of these branches of these repos together, so that we can easily get the analysts to poke at them on the web. And we want to make it easier also on the developer side to spin up all of these things. Right now it's a very manual procedure, and it can take quite a while to just get your dev setup going, as maybe you've already found. So I've been using Kubernetes, which totally, have you heard of that? Do you know what that is? We may have lost him.
Sorry, there was a jackhammer next to me. Was that to me?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I'm trying to decide how much context to give. So I'm using this tool called Kubernetes, which is
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, like an open source version of how Google does their own internal deployment. And so what I'm hoping this will allow us to do is update production seamlessly, scale up and down if we have performance problems. And also, as Rob and I recently discovered, you can deploy across zones. So the conversation we were having about, do we worry about West Coast deployment and East Coast analysts being a problem? It makes it really, really easy to just undo decisions that were made or experiment with different things. It's incredibly quick, and it should also be incredibly quick to have as many test deployments running simultaneously as we want, in addition to some production deployment. So that's kind of sort of the long-term goal. Short-term goal is just use this to get everything on AWS and kind of organize our configuration in a sane way that could reasonably be handed off to the developers or maybe to a DevOps person that Dawn has found. So that's been going pretty well. I have the Rails app, the React app, and the Python diffing server all running inside Docker containers deployed by Kubernetes. Not everything, not all the features quite work yet, but it feels quite close.
Do you have like Docker files for any of those things? So I was just trying to get my environment straightened out before for the UI in particular.
Yep.
And of course, it was running into all kinds of dependency problems. We had a different version of Node on our research server here. Right. So I was starting to think about using some kind of virtualized or container environment. I've used Docker before. I have not used Kubernetes. But if I don't recall seeing a Docker file in.
So the most recent pull request into every repository is a Docker file.
Ah, cool. Okay.
As of like this morning. So.
I mean, worth noting as a side note there that like those Docker files might help you out, but they're not particularly development oriented.
Okay.
So but they're all running in production.
They're going to require you to do like full rebuilds every time you change the source.
Okay, so yeah, so there's probably not like a file watch going on that will
not at all
load automatically. Yeah,
no,
okay.
It's all production oriented. If you want
I can probably
stick some cycles into that, it would be great to have a dev one as well. Yeah. I was thinking, and I'd be interested in your feedback on this actually, like for local development, there's such a thing as Minikube, right? You can run Kubernetes locally where you've got one node, which is like a VM on your laptop, but the same deployment layout that you'd have in production, which has some advantages, I guess. Or we could go with like Docker Compose, where we use the same Docker files, but use Docker Compose to assemble them, which is perhaps a little lighter. You only need to learn Docker. You don't also need to learn Kubernetes. If you have any experience with, local development of coordinated apps or any opinions as you deal with this stuff, happy to hear.
Yeah, I don't unfortunately have much input there. I'm relatively new even to Docker. I've just played around with it, to the extent of, building images and so forth. But I have no experience with the orchestration side of things. So your guess is as good as mine there.
Okay.
But I do hear great things about Kubernetes, for what it's worth. That seems to be kind of taking over the whole orchestration side of things. So,
yeah, we just saw that Amazon just announced that they're giving in and adopting it instead of trying to compete with it. So
yeah, the same with Docker too, right? They had Swarm, which I think was a similar service, and I think they're saying, okay, people are reaching consensus that this is what they want to be using.
Yeah. I've been super impressed. I done like one tutorial on it a couple months ago, and I dove in over the weekend, and things have come together pretty quickly.
Side question for you on that. As I was dealing with some things earlier, I noticed that the nodes in the Kubernetes deploy that you have running right now are across availability zones in the West region. Can you choose which zones those are, or is it just automatic?
I can choose.
Okay, cool. Mainly I was just curious about that for the purposes of making sure databases are in the right place.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Obviously you can also choose that. Right, so the one, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but one thing that we could envision is, I think the standard way of deploying this is with 2 master nodes, one on each coast. So US East master node, US West master node, and then like worker nodes working for each. And so someone connecting on either coast would get a fast response. But I wouldn't necessarily want to spend the money on that until we measure the actual performance difference between that and the standard thing. And we should also look at what the costs are. But we were worrying a lot about like those performance implications earlier, and I like that it'll now be a very quick decision to very easy to experiment with different scenarios and measure the costs and measure the performance and make a rational decision rather than just sort of guessing and then discovering that we're stuck.
Yeah, I think the harder part of that, just so we're thinking about ahead of time, is making sure that multi-master works well with RDS, because you'll have to have that. I think that'll be a bigger problem than anything to do with the actual deployment of the software.
Can you have a multi-mode? You can have a multi-mode RDS though, right?
What do you mean by multi-mode?
Or not multi-mode, multi-zone RDS.
Yeah. But I'm not sure if that is necessarily multi-master and what caveats you have to make in order to.
Is this
make it work
MySQL?
well. Postgres.
Postgres. Okay, interesting. I thought multi-master, that's a pretty new feature in Postgres, isn't it?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
I don't know the ins and outs because I've never done multi-master with Postgres before, and I've only ever done it once with MySQL like long ago.
Yeah, no, I think that was in MySQL quite a bit before Postgres. So yeah, I've worked mainly with Postgres, so that's good to know.
Yeah, I was just looking at so Amazon has it for MySQL, Oracle, and Postgres.
Right. So we'll just have to make sure we spend the time to understand the caveats.
Cool. for the, Rob, do you want to talk a little about the work you're doing with the scraper and the UI questions that we've been sort of going back and forth on?
So the short version of this is that PR does the change that we talked about in the earlier meeting. It seems like there's a lot of discussion though in a different direction. So Dan has approved most of the work. All the hard parts are done, and we can really easily change what columns those land in, which is the open question. So I'm just holding off on merging it until it seems like we have an actual answer there,
right,
or something approaching an answer, as opposed to two very divergent answers. The longer version of that for you, Dan, is the way. So if you're not familiar yet, this web monitoring versionista scraper repo is a node process that sits there, and it regularly, well, it does a whole bunch of things, but it's focused around taking data from versionista, which is the existing service we use to gather like information about changes, and shoves it into our database so that we can do more with it. And it also pulls the raw data out of versionista and puts that in S3 for us. And one of the other things that it does is every week it generates a set of spreadsheets, which lists all the pages in every site that have changed during that week. And that's kind of the hit list that an analyst works off of to like do their checking for the week. Our end goal is for that not to exist, and that should all happen within our UI. But our sort of migration is to change the links in that spreadsheet from pointing to the diff views in versionista to pointing to the diff views in our UI. So that they'll still use the spreadsheets the same as they have been, but they'll be going to our UI instead of versionista. And eventually, once our UI does the job the spreadsheets are doing, then we get rid of the spreadsheets. But so this is basically about changing those links. And the issue being, like, we don't want to put analysts in a situation where, well, if it turns out our diff is working really poorly for some set of cases, that it's a giant pain in the ass for them because they have to like go through our UI to get to versionista. So in what part of the spreadsheets do we put which links?
And so when you hear us talking about our first milestone, like the 0.0.1, that's having our analysts use our interface, not versionistas. So everything is pretty stable. We just need to sort of decide how we want to repoint these sheets. And if we want to add like new links to our stuff as well as the versionista links, or I think the other question, or the other option is just to have us start overwriting some of the links. And the sort of one of the things that's more complex is part of the workflow is people are taking those worksheets and sort of like copy and pasting all these links and rows across sheets. And so if we start changing the columns in the sheets, it'll sort of break up the workflow. But it sounds like so the two things that we're sort of going back and forth on is, do we so add additional columns, and then Toli and I would have to go in and sort of just make sure all the other sort of sheets that would be affected have the right columns, rows, or do we just replace there are 3 links to versionista, and so do we replace the 2 most used ones with our links, and then keep one versionista link, which just talking to 3 analysts say they never actually touch, and that way if they need to fall back to versionista, they're one link away to versionista. They would still have to do some clicking to get to the views that they do want, but they have, it's still one link away. And I mean, is that an agreement that those are the 2 options right now? That's what I have in my mind.
I think so. I feel like that is the same as my understanding of it. And the one that's implemented in the PR is the second one that you described.
Right. But it's a switch. Yeah, so if we wanted, but like I think Rob, you said it, if we needed to add some extra columns, it wouldn't be that much work,
Right. That part is literally really easy.
Love to hear that from the developers.
It's mind-bogglingly easy.
Okay, great. Good job on coding for changes. So totally, of those two options, I don't know if you sort of fully understood that other option of just rewriting the two columns and keeping the Versionista for the page view.
Yeah, I got the options. I guess my consideration is sort of like taking the most pessimistic approach and saying like, well, all of a sudden, you know, people are using the software, things are crashing, or it's like intermittent. There's downtime mid monitoring. My consideration was, let's just keep the switch from Versionista to our software as kind of flat as possible, so that, you know, it's fine. We could export two sheets so that if there's downtime, like, okay, we'll switch to the other sheet. I see that as maybe more cumbersome than setting up like just a new workflow that has two things in parallel. It basically would include adding one row or two rows, depending on how we want to do it, and just making sure we communicate really clearly. Probably it would take like an hour of mine raise time to switch. But I'm also, you know, if the argument is like, no, this is fine, and this is going to work, I'm willing to hear that. I just my consideration is like, this is the first time we're switching this. I'd like there to be as little like discontinuity for the analyst as possible. Anyway, sorry that if you guys already talked about this at the last meeting, apologies for me missing that. Maybe these arguments were already addressed, but that was my perspective.
I think the two things. So I think I agree with you in that of the three options, the two spreadsheet option is the worst, and I don't think we should do that. The thing I would say is the counter argument to adding columns so that it's smooth and easy for analysts is that I would really like all the analysts who are having issues to immediately stand up and scream when it changes, because what we have right now is that every time somebody demos a new thing and an analyst is like, oh, that's really cool, I want to try it out, I get an email that's like, I can't figure out how to log into my account and it doesn't work, even though we've had multiple rounds of get everybody accounts. So I worry that like if we just put two sets of links, if somebody doesn't immediately start trying to use the one, then they won't come back and be like, I can't fucking do my work anymore. And that will help us actually get them accounts, even though it's a little bit of an annoying barrier. Or worse yet, they'll like try ours and have a problem with it, but they won't worry about it because they'll be like, oh, it's still in development, it's fine, I'll switch back to the Versionista one. And because that's easy. And so again, like we won't hear about it. Yeah, that's my counter argument concern.
And I mean, I definitely value the analyst's time, but they do seem pretty flexible. Like, if you know what I mean, like they're very open to trying the new tool, and so I don't think they're sort of saying like, I think they realize like Versionista is imperfect, so you know, I think this will be initially easier to get them to switch over. So we want to make sure that, you know, we give them that opportunity. And like Rob says, that they don't just quickly fall back just for a slight bump, or they just sort of will try to figure it out later or something, and they just want to get the work done.
Yeah, I'm suspicious that people will fall back rather than complain, because they'll think, oh, it might be my fault, it might be something dumb that I'm doing, and I don't really have time to figure that out right now, so I'll fall back. But what if we did it in a two-step process? What if week 1 is one way, and then week 2 is the next way, and then so we avoid forcing raw problems on people, and we'd be a little more assertive once we're 1 week more confident.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Sorry, totally. Did you catch that? No. So basically, Dan suggested maybe for the next week, we add the extra columns, and then you and I just spend an hour like redoing all the other affected worksheets, and then see how that goes. And then if no one complains, we just take those extra columns away. I mean, that will cause us a little bit of extra work.
Well, just blank them. I mean, you don't need to necessarily go through and do your work twice, because in the end, we're leaving spreadsheets behind. So,
right,
for a couple months, we'll have 2 blank columns in the spreadsheet.
Well, can I suggest an intermediate as well? Potentially, getting buy-in from 3 or 4 analysts saying like, you are the guinea pigs. Here are only the new, like having a week of basically monitoring like a subset of people that know that this is a trial period. And then we have to hold them to basically report to us if there's anything going on, and they're ready to switch to other sheets if things go wrong, and basically have like a subgroup rather than trying to get everyone on it at the same time.
We can certainly try that, but to do that, we would still want to give them all the columns then, because some people will be using the older stuff, the Virginia links, and someone will be using the newer stuff. And if that's the case, then we could also just have everyone like select some people to say like, please try it out, but then let anyone who wants to try it out as well.
Well, if we do it that way, we could just give those people who are in it the version of the spreadsheet that only has our links and no Versionista links.
Yeah.
So the way I would do that on the technical end is, Totally, you'll just get 2 emails Tuesday mornings instead of 1. And 1 email will have all the spreadsheets with, like they currently are, and 1 email will have all the spreadsheets with our links instead of Versionista links.
Well, and keep the Versionista page link, I guess.
Okay.
So that they could compare from that sheet if need be. You know what I mean?
I thought we were picking one to make it so that you guys didn't have to change the columns.
So there's 3 Versionista links. There's the page view, latest to base, and last 2. And I would say replace the latest to base and last 2 with that's the proposal, right? With
I got it.
New links, but keep the old Versionista page, and that gives you access to the Versionista, and basically just work with a subgroup of like 3 analysts who understand things, who understand what's going on. And if we see it's kind of rocky, then we add 2 links side by side. And if not, then we keep it. Then we maybe transition.
That works for me.
That seems workable.
Cool. So that's great. And I'll sort of add those action items to the notes. I remember we're at 2:30, so I don't want to extend too much longer. But for Datsun, were you able to take a peek at in getting anything running locally?
I just started a bit before this call, so
Okay.
now I was just working through dependency issues. It's just a matter of time. I mean,
Yeah.
at this point, like I was trying to fit it in with like our system install, and I think I'll just spin up a Docker container. I'll tweak it so that it runs in some sort of development mode. I mean, that might be more useful to everyone generally, and I don't think that'll be hard. So
Great. But it sounds like it's great is that you have some React experience too. So
actually, what I do, like I spend most of my time coding these days, doing something React related, I would say. So yeah, it's a good fit.
That's excellent. Is Rob, if you have, or Dan, if you have anything off the top of your head that you think is the biggest priority in terms of the 0.02 tickets?
I know I suggested something in Slack, but I forget what it is. Do you remember?
That might have slipped by me.
Yeah.
There's still time, so we don't need to decide right now, but if we sort of put the higher priority on a ticket, maybe that's a good place for him to start.
I'll find it. I have no idea what I was
Okay. If you can't find it, we can take this
Yep.
this offline too. I think in the next meeting too would be great is just to start prioritizing the second milestone work. Because I think I'll share them, but totally had some also questions because of just making sure like when do we feel like milestone 2 is accomplished, because we want to make sure obviously when we pull the plug on Virginista, we're confident that that we're all good and that'll, we've done as much due diligence and testing as we can on it. So we just want to make sure that all those concerns are sort of documented in issues if they need to be added, and then we can start prioritizing the work of for the second milestone.
Yeah, my consideration there was like notifying IA that we're relying on them even more than we were, and then also coming up with a contingency plan in case something stops to spool up our own scrapers, and understanding if that's like a month-long project or a 2-week-long project would be good from the outset so that we like know how to manage this.
Yeah, I think on the UI side, just a general comment about this milestone. I don't see any of these as necessarily blockers for version 2, because the only difference between version 2 and version 1 should be it's transparent to the way the analysts work, right? The data is coming from IA instead of from Versionista, but nothing that the analysts do changes, which is not true in these other milestones, which makes it special.
That is the thing I was also going to say, is that I don't think any of the things that we have planned for UI are actually 002 requirements. I think the only things in UI that are 002 requirements are things that we don't know yet, that we discover when analysts start using it and going, this is infeasible.
Yep, I was going to say the same.
Yeah. Or I would love X. I would love it to do X.
No,
or whatever.
This is infeasible. Only things that are this is
Okay.
infeasible. Everything else is 003 or later.
Or point 1, really.
Point 1. Sure.
Yeah,
Point taken.
Feature parity with Versionista within reason is the goal.
Great. So then it sounds like we'll probably have to create some new issues, I think, just to make sure that, we're confident that, the data we're getting from AI is sufficient to do the work. And totally to your other point, and similarly in the way of, starting rolling out with a few analysts with the new UI, we'll obviously do some similar kinds of rollouts too, right? Where we don't need to totally flip the switch, but just start doing tests to see, compare results of Virginista's data versus the Internet Archive data. So that it's not like we just, we'll have better insight on how close we are or how confident we are in our results. Go ahead, Rob.
The other thing, this is unrelated to what you just said, but I realized that earlier when I was trying to say a thing to Dodson, I was muted. So I was just going to say, if you haven't noticed already, one thing you'll realize as you dig into the UI code base is that it is probably the least well put together of all of ours. Like the files and processing are a little confusingly organized, but the actual organization of the code itself is the worst in UI. And especially as you have a lot of React experience, you might have some very strong thoughts about how we should be better managing the data flow. And we would love to hear those very strong thoughts. We have long had on the table that we should probably be using Redux or something, or MobX or whatever people are excited about. I think Redux is simple and straightforward, so I'm a fan of that. But we just haven't done it. And so if you have strong thoughts about that or expertise in that, that would also be a great thing to have, even though it's sort of very under the hood and not feature focused for analysts. I think like we just said in this upcoming milestone, there aren't UI features that we think are critical, except for things that we don't know yet. So that could be really valuable, and it will make further changes to the UI a lot easier.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be thinking about that as I review it. I do use Redux in the Risk Finder, which is like this main React app that I work on. And it's great in many ways. I mean, it's, the knock on it is it adds a lot of kind of boilerplate code, which is true. But I think it's worth it in the way it simplifies passing of data to components. So yeah, that's something to think about. But yeah, I don't, it's also not, it's not really necessary depending on, like, I think it becomes a bigger deal like the larger the app is. So it doesn't seem like this is that big yet. So I don't know. Yeah, I'll just be keeping it in mind as I look through it.
Yeah, I think we've kind of approached it from a similar perspective, which is this doesn't seem so complicated yet that we're freaking out about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's great. So I think that does it. Does anyone have anything else they want to share, or should we wrap it up? Yeah. So,
Just some quick points. We'll be releasing our big report to journalists on Friday. So Dodson, this is a 1-year analysis of climate change web content that's been altered, removed from the federal government's websites. We're working with Climate Central actually on some messaging. So just so you all know, it'll be public on Wednesday the 10th. So you'll see a lot of buzz around after that. Cool. Other than that, there will be a discussion tomorrow at noon, at EDGI-wide meeting, noon Eastern, which is going to be around the new efforts that we're launching to monitor websites outside of environment, climate, and energy. So anyone that can make that, would be great to have the perspective of the dev team and others. There should be a public discussion about this work. I think that's all I got.
Do you know how long that's supposed to go? Because I can probably make the beginning of it, but I definitely
They're kicking us
on
out
by
at
like
12:30. It
Okay.
becomes a super secret meeting at 12:30.
That's perfect for me then.
and then at 1, it continues on for a general funding, like the Packard proposal. I mean, if you can join, that'd be great too. I'll be joining that as well. I can share what's mentioned on that. But I'll just be advocating for those additional resources we already talked about in terms of like, funds for a developer, funds for someone to help with the analysts, and then maybe, another person to do anything from PMing to, communications or other things too. So, but that'll take a while. So if you can't miss that meeting, there's plenty of time to get caught up to speed on the Packard grant. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Hope your new year's off to a good start, and I'll see you in the various forms of social media and online services.
It's great to have you on board on the regular.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks. Good to
welcome.
be here.
All right.
Cheers.
Thanks.
All right,
Hey,
take
guys.
care, everyone.